You're holding a seed. Looks harmless, right? But what if I told you that this tiny thing is at the center of the most quiet, most strategic power grab happening on the African continent right now? While everyone's watching military coups and election drama, there's a different kind of takeover happening. No guns, no headlines, just lawyers, parents, and international trade agreements. By the end of this video, you will understand why 3 corporations you've probably never heard about now control what millions of Africans can plant, harvest, and eat. Stay with me, this gets wild. So here's what surprised me when I started researching on this. Most people think seeds are just natural. You plant maize, you get maize. And you save some seeds for next season. That's how it's worked in Africa for thousands of years, right? But in the last 20 years, something fundamental changed. Seeds became intellectual property. And when that happened, the rules of the game completely flipped. There's this African proverb that says, "He who controls the seeds controls the harvest." But what happens when people who control the seeds aren't even on the continent? Let me show you. How did we get there? Between 2015 and 2018, something massive happened in the global agricultural industry that barely made headlines in Africa. Bayer bought Monsanto for $63 billion. Dow and DuPont merged to create Corteva. And China acquired Syngenta for $43 billion. These weren't just business deals. These were strategic consolidations. According to USDA analysis and investigative reports from 2024, these mergers created what we now call the Big Four: BASF, Bayer, Corteva, and Syngenta. And together, they control 60 to 70% of the global seed and agrochemical market. But here's where it gets interesting for Africa. Bayer and Corteva alone hold over 80% of all patents related to genetically engineered crops. 80%. But now you might be thinking, okay, but these are American and European companies. What does that have to do with African farmers? Everything. Because in Africa, these corporations don't need to dominate retail markets directly. They operate through something far more powerful and far less visible. They operate through regional trade agreements and seed law harmonization. And that's where things get really strategic. Stay with me. How does seeds move across Africa? Alright, here's the layer most people miss. Africa has several regional economic blocks. You've got ECOWAS in West Africa, COMESA covering East and Southern Africa, SADC in the South, and EAC in East Africa. Now, since the mid-2000s, these blocks have been pushing what they call harmonized seed regulations. And what does that mean in plain English? It means when a seed variety gets approved in 2 or 3 member countries in ECOWAS, for example, it can automatically circulate among all 15 of ECOWAS states without needing separate approval in each country. Sounds efficient, right? Faster trade, better access to improved seeds, more food security. And to be fair, that's part of the story. But here's the issue. When you harmonize seed laws across regions, you also harmonize who gets to decide which seeds are in the catalog. And this is where those patents we talked about earlier start to matter. Because if Bayer or Corteva owns the patent on a drought-resistant maize variety, and that variety gets approved in Ghana and Nigeria, it can now legally move through the entire ECOWAS region. Senegal, Mali, Burkina Faso, Ivory Coast, all of them. 15 countries, one approval process. And the patent holder collects royalties across the entire region. Now, to be clear, not everyone sees this as a bad thing. Some economists and agronomists argue that these harmonized rules are actually essential. They say African farmers need fast access to high-yield varieties to feed a growing population, and that fragmented regulations slow everything down. And they are not wrong about the challenges. But here's what they don't always mention. The rules being harmonized, they are not African rules. They are being shaped by something called TRIPS. And that's where the chess game gets really strategic. We'll get to that in a second, but first, let me tell you about the farmers who are actually living this reality. Imagine you are a smallholder farmer in Kenya. You've been growing maize the same way your parents did, harvesting and saving some seeds for the next season. It's not just practical, it's how you stay independent. It's how you adapt to your specific climate and soil. Now, a new GMO maize variety enters your region. It's drought resistant. It promises 30% higher yields. And in a bad year, that could mean the difference between eating and going hungry. So you buy these seeds. But here's what changes. You can't save the seeds. These seeds come with legal restrictions. You are not allowed to save them for next season. The patent holder, let's say Corteva, requires you to buy fresh seeds every single year. And if you do try to save them, technically, you are violating intellectual property law. This isn't a hypothetical deal we'll get us. This is the model. Now again, to be balanced, some farmers really do benefit from these high-yield varieties. Higher potential harvest, better pest resistance, access to export markets. But the trade-off is real. You are trading autonomy for productivity. And once you're in that system, getting out isn't easy. There's another African proverb that fits perfectly here. A man who uses force is afraid of reasoning. The question isn't whether GMO seeds are good or bad. The question is, who controls the terms? And that brings us to the third layer, the global framework that makes all of this possible. What global rules enable this? In 1995, the World Trade Organization introduced something called TRIPS, stands for Trade-Related Aspects of Intellectual Property Rights. In basic terms, TRIPS is the global rulebook that says, if you want to trade with the world, you have to protect intellectual property, including patents on plant varieties. Now, TRIPS gave countries some flexibility. You didn't have to adapt Western-style plant laws exactly. You could create what's called a sui generis system, basically your own vision of plant variety protection. But here's what happens in practice. International trade negotiations, donor pressure, and aid packages often pushed African countries towards what's called TRIPS Plus obligations. TRIPS Plus means strong IP protection than the minimum required. Protection that favors corporate breeders over farmers' traditional rights. NGOs and human rights organizations have been pushing back hard on this. In 2025, NGOs from both Africa and Europe released a joint statement calling on governments to reject TRIPS Plus seed IP rules, arguing that they undermine farmers' rights and threaten the right to food. There's a reason why major powers, the US, China, Europe, all protect their domestic seed industries, because they understand that whoever controls the seeds controls the food system, and whoever controls the food system has leverage over nations. So when we ask who really owns Africa's seeds, we are really asking who decides Africa's future, on whose terms, and with what leverage. The next 10 years will decide. So here's where we are. The Big Four control 60 to 70% of the global seed market, They hold 80% of GMO crop patents. Regional rules are making it easier for patented varieties to move across African borders. And international IP frameworks are tightening around seed systems. But everything's not over. African governments still have policy space under TRIPS to design their own plant variety protection systems. Farmer movements and NGOs are pushing for right-based seed laws. And some countries are investing in public, African-owned agricultural research. So the question is, will Africa use that space? In 10 to 20 years, Africa's food security will either be anchored in patents owned abroad or in systems built and controlled at home. And that's not a question for the governments alone. It's a question for all of us who care about Africa's future. So here's my challenge to you, goal-getters. Ask yourself, what type of seed systems do you want to see in Africa? One that optimizes corporate IP and rapid commercialization, or one that balances innovation with farmers' rights and local control? And more importantly, what are you willing to do to make that vision real? Because power games like this aren't won by people who own the most patents. They are won by the people who understand the game. Now you understand the game. If this changed how you see food security and geopolitics, share this video with someone who needs to know this. And let me know what you think in the comments. Should African countries push harder for seed sovereignty, or do you think corporate partnerships are the way forward? That's it. Thanks for watching this video and hope to see you on my next one as always.